Hello and welcome to the clipping in 1,500 mile review of the Oakley Jawbreaker single vision prescription Black Iridium polarizing lenses. The Oakley Jawbreaker itself doesn't need much of an introduction. It's been popular for quite a few years now, and it's a cycling specific model with a good wraparound, quite a large lens. You can see there's a good wraparound. The lens extends quite a way to what you might call the brows, and that allows protection and coverage in a range of head positions. So what are we looking at? It's an Oakley prescription Black Iridium polarizing lens. Black Iridium is Oakley speak for their, I think it's their darkest standard lens. It's a very dark grey, and the Black Iridium is a light mirrored coating. You can see that there. And polarizing coating on top of that for reducing glare and those kinds of situations. I've used it typically from late July until middle September. So a range of British summer conditions, which can include everything from very bright sunlight to permanent sort of gloomy days with heavy rain. I've ridden it on road, gravel, mountain bike, through trails that are overhanging trees, poor light, onto the sort of brightest sunny days. So I think I've given it a fair test, given that it's a summer review for dark sunglasses. I certainly think that this lens, which has 10% transmission of ambient light, I think it can cope with more or less any summer cycling situation. It wouldn't necessarily cover you for glacier travel or mountaineering above the snow line, but for a cycling specific model, I think it's got all the bases covered. I'm primarily talking about the prescription lenses, which they're made at Oakley's labs, rather than the frame. I had a Jawbreaker frame with a non-prescription low light lens. I bought that quite a few months previously. So in this case, I bought just the shield. And I've done, as I mentioned, 1,500 miles over a range of surfaces, about 100 hours of riding altogether. Now, this is an unsponsored, unsubsidized review, so I'll talk about it overall. I'll put something in the description, but I bought the lens from a sports specialist optician who happened to be based around 45 miles away from me in York. I mentioned Extreme Eyewear was the company, but effectively the process was done entirely online. I looked at the website. It was a remote purchase, shall we call it that. I picked the lenses, I picked the coatings and tints and so on, and then it was just a case of, they advised that you use a prescription that was issued inside the last 2 years. I used a high street prescription for my normal specs that was around 8 months old. Once you've uploaded that prescription, then effectively you place your order. I paid up front, I received an email notification, and then I was quite impressed that within 13 days of clicking on purchase, I was riding around in them. I think for a specialist product that's going to be made wherever Oakley's optical labs are, 13 days struck me as being pretty good. Once I'd received that email notification from the optician, then the next notification was from the courier, which in my case was Royal Mail. They were delivered in a cardboard carton with some packing materials and the sort of Oakley lightly armoured casing. I mentioned that I bought the frame and the lenses separately. Altogether, if you bought them directly as a unit, I think it would be in the low 320s pounds, say 320, 325 pounds to buy it as a complete unit. I bought them separately, so I paid a little over £230 for the shield lens, and then I think altogether for my frame I paid around 70-ish. I got them in a sale, complete with a non-prescription low light lens. So let's move on to the review itself. I find that the wraparound and the coverage over a range of head positions is excellent. I really can't find fault with that at all. I also find what's very interesting, there's negligible internal reflection. Because the wraparound's so good, even with bright sunlight or strobing through tree cover, you don't get that kind of off-putting change in vision and change in brightness that you get with ordinary sunglasses, where the light creeps behind the lens and you can see your eyeball. You don't get that with a good wraparound. I also found that because this shield extends above eyebrow level, when you're down in a more aero position and you're effectively looking over your eyebrows, you've still got coverage. I found that very impressive too. Cycling-specific design, obviously, though. The Jawbreaker has ventilation slots in the lenses. I hope you can maybe see that there. Certainly there on the side. There are little ventilation slots on the lens and on the frame itself where the O is for Oakley. I found that if you're descending at speed, maybe 35, 40 miles an hour, you can feel a slight air current rushing through those vents. Not enough to give you a sore eye or anything, but you're aware of it. It's not a problem. I also think that because of those vents, I've only had them steam up on me once. And that was the typical scenario of a tailwind climb on a kind of a damp morning, and then I had to stop at some traffic lights that took longer to change than expected, and therefore the glasses ever so slightly started to steam up. Of course, I'm aware that the true test of any cycling glasses steaming up is going to be in autumn winter, because once the ambient temperature drops into single digits and you're also working and maybe you're slightly overdressed too, then the tendency to steam up is going to be greatly increased. The real test of them then, I think, won't be so much steaming up when you stop or steaming up when you're going slow, but rather how quickly they're clear when you go over the crest of a hill and you begin to descend. I have every confidence that these will clear very quickly in that respect. I've mentioned that they are Oakley's darkest lens, and as such they have 10% transmission of ambient light. I think I haven't encountered it during the summer testing conditions, but I think at winter, when we're talking of more of a perma-gloom, they may well be too dark for, say, mountain bike trails under tree cover. That's what I feel. And I don't think, realistically, anyone would choose a Black Iridium sunglasses for that kind of application anyway. Now, the Jawbreaker has this wide field of view, and it's maybe not as wide as some of the current cycling glasses that are more like a ski goggle or a motocross goggle. They're sort of like that, but with branches attached. The Jawbreaker doesn't have that field of vision, but it's still a large sunglasses, a large shield. And moving on to the actual prescription inserts, you can see, certainly if we turn it that way, you can see the size of prescription insert there versus shield. I think they're a pretty good size, and they've got quite a curve on them. Maybe we can see it that way around. Let's see if we can get a focus there without too much. The mirroring, unfortunately, is reflecting the camera back at you, but you can see that the prescription inserts curve quite a lot, and they cover a large percentage of that shield. I haven't encountered a situation where I've had to turn my head excessively. I find that just moving my eyes around, I can see everything in focus through the prescription part of the lenses. That's very good. I like that. One slight drawback that I have noticed, if you are glancing over your shoulder to maybe check for cars at a junction or to see if there is another rider or something like that, there is a very slight blind spot, and it's caused by that rather large O branch there that we're talking about. You can see it perhaps on the inside there. There. And certainly compared to what I used previously, the Bolle Edge 2, which had a much narrower side branch there, you can see much slimmer, and there wasn't a junction on the side of the shield. So there you didn't have a blind spot. What I found with the Oakley, just occasionally I find that I'm encountering that when I look over my shoulder, and it just means that I have to crank my neck by a few more degrees to get around that blind spot. Not a huge drawback, but perhaps for somebody who doesn't have the same kind of neck mobility, it might be. It's worth mentioning. One thing that I'm very impressed by is that the frames stay put. If you're riding on bumpy trails, they don't bounce. And if you're, how can I put it? If you're looking under your armpit to see what sprocket you're in, so that they're actually hanging down at 90 degrees, then they don't move very often at all. I have on occasion, if I've been looking at my back sprockets under my armpit, I've had them very occasionally just swing a little bit where they lose contact with the nose piece, but the side branches still hold them in place. That might happen, maybe difficult to say, but perhaps 1 in 10 perhaps. One in 10 occasions when you do that check, they might just rotate a little bit. But I've never felt that they're going to drop off, which is the main thing. The other interesting thing about them, this, I think they call it unobtainium. I think that's the Oakley speak, but the kind of rubber that they use for the nose piece and the side branches, it seems to get stickier when you warm up and maybe when you start sweating, and then they don't move at all. That's very impressive. That's a sport-specific design. Obviously, that is a design feature of the Jawbreaker rather than the lens, but it's worth mentioning. All my outdoor rides have been wearing a helmet, and therefore the sidearms have an adjustable length. There are sort of 3 length positions. I generally keep them on the shortest length, and they haven't interfered with the helmet harness or helmet strappings, which is nice. The grip of the side branches is quite light. I've done some. I haven't done any very long rides. I think my longest rides, I've done a couple of like 100-mile, 6-hour kind of things, and they've been remarkably comfortable throughout. You know, I haven't finished and thought, "Ooh, my ears are sore," or you're sore around the temples, or you're left with a red mark on the bridge of your nose. None of that. They're actually quite a light system too, so you don't feel that pressure on the bridge of your nose on longer rides. I'm confident that if they've been comfortable for 6.25 hours, that they will be comfortable for 8, 9, and beyond. One of the first things that struck me was how high definition, how clear, low distortion the Oakley optics are. Certainly for the same prescription compared to my high street glasses, they were so much clearer. They were almost, it felt that, even though they were the same prescription, these felt far newer, if you like, far sharper, far more in focus. And I'm sure that on a fast descent, that must be worth a few seconds, because I can see things even earlier than I would with prescription glasses, which is brilliant. I think also that the polarizing effect on these is very, very well done. Much better than high street polarizing sunglasses that I've used. There's no distortion. You don't get that strange halo effect around wet grates and wet grids that you sometimes get with ordinary polarizing glasses. And people have said that you can't see through car windscreens or car windows with polarizing specs. I've not had that problem at all. And they do the job when it comes to reducing glare off reflected water or any reflective surface. So they're superb for that. I think they'll be really good for low winter sun, you know, if we ever get any winter sun. Like all polarizing lenses, they do black out LCD screens. And that means smartphones, it means GoPro screens, smartwatches, all the usual situations. At the wrong angle, the LCD is blacked out. That always happens. It's something to be aware of with polarizing lenses. I think, you know, if I want to take a photograph with my phone in landscape mode, I can't see the screen, so I have to peer over the top. I'm fine with the GoPro. The orientation of the GoPro just happens to be I can see the screen through these. But someone who's using a lot of gadgets, they might have to be careful about the orientation of the gadgets if they're using these particular polarizing lenses. A very impressive quality of these lenses, and I don't know whether it's a coating, but they seem to almost repel water in a way that I've used them in rain, I've used them with splashes from the trail and puddles, and even your own brow sweat if you're on a particularly hard climb, and they don't bead like an ordinary spectacle would. They almost repel water. It's given me a lot of confidence. I've never, on wet days, on rainy days, I've never sort of had to put them on the tip of my nose or even think about taking them off. They've been remarkably clear, and the vision has been unimpaired even on rainy days. What I would do, if it's absolutely pouring it down, I'd put a peaked cap under a helmet, and that just shields, you know, the top of the glasses from the worst of the downpour. But I do think that whether that coating will wear off with time, I can't say. After 100 hours, they're as good as ever. So far for cleaning, I've experimented with a range of things. I've used alcohol-free lens cleaners. I've used camera lens wiping cloths that have a very slight alcohol content. And I've even used good old soap and warm water for getting mountain bike mud off there. All have worked well. All I finished them off with the Oakley supplied lens cloth. I think it might be some kind of microfiber lens cloth come carrying bag, and the optical clarity after 100 hours is first rate. I appreciate that with any single lens system, you don't want to scratch the lenses because you can't replace the insert as you would with the modular system. But so far so good, 100 hours, perfect. So getting towards some kind of a summary, I appreciate that it's a specialist route, not cheap. I mean, we're talking of £300 to £325, and I could have bought a clip-in based system for about a third of that, you know, with the same coatings, with polarizing and anti-reflection and all that kind of thing. So certainly not cheap. If you want to know some of my thinking towards sort of building up towards this purchase, I'll put a link up there for a longer video that shows my working out. But this Oakley system so far has not let me down in 100 hours of riding in some pretty rough weather. I'm very, very pleased with it. I realise that the true test perhaps of a cycling specs is going to be autumn-winter. That's when they really start to be a problem, or can be a problem. But so far, what I think I've got here with this Black Iridium system, I've got a £300, £325 system that could also be modular. I think that this would handle maybe 7 or 8 months of the year. And then what I could do, what I intend to do, is to buy a clear lens with an anti-reflective coating that can pop in here for dark days, for winter, those conditions. And obviously that would be somewhere in the high 190s of pounds to build that system to cover effectively all light conditions, all cycling optics. I see that as being a good subject for a sequel, for a sequel video to this, testing a clear lens with an anti-reflective coating over the winter months. And then obviously, because as I've shown that it's so easy to change the lens in a Jawbreaker, that with a system you can change on the day itself. I wouldn't particularly want to change at the roadside with dirty hands, but before you're setting off on a ride, you make a judgment on the light conditions and you put the appropriate lens in. I think that the Oakley prescription system with this Black Iridium polarizing lens has certainly exceeded my expectations. It's done better than I thought it would over the range of conditions that I've encountered. And I'll certainly be buying that clear lens that I mentioned earlier. But for now, look, I'm going to sign off on this video. I will post updates on both this system and the clear ones over the course of the winter. And I hope, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll field them to the best of my ability. Bye for now.